All right, we're streaming on YouTube again. So if you did happen to see that last live stream, I ended up doxing myself. So yeah, I got that deleted. Hopefully nobody nefarious ended up saying that. So let me update this. Let me double check that. Yep, that video got deleted. That's good. Okay, here we go. Here's the updated URL. Welcome to Office Hours. Again, let me share my screen here really quick. If you've never been to Office Hours before, this is your chance to come and ask me questions, and I do my best to answer. Sometimes the answer is, I don't know. But yeah, I do my best. So I took like a 5-week break because I had 4 weeks of my Epic Web Dev workshop series. I'm recording those right now. So it's going to be over 500 videos when I'm done. Pretty nuts, the amount of content that will be there. But yeah, so I've got a lot of work to do still. But yeah, I was giving the workshops during Office Hours, so I haven't done Office Hours in a while. And then I had React Rally, so I didn't do Office Hours then either. But yeah. Let's jump up here, and this is the question I was answering. The answer to this question, or the question itself, is how do I do that? I also have this and a bunch of others. And so yeah, that is done using Alfred. Alfred has this cool feature called snippets, and I have custom snippets for that. So feel free to take a look at that. And that's how I doxed myself, was I actually revealed my snippets, and some of them include my private information. And so anyway, yeah, we're moving on from that. Hopefully that is helpful. Let's just read through this. Okay, here we go. Here's another question answering this now. Watch a video simplifying React hooks. I'll pull that up and pull this up, which was about how to effectively handle deep comparison and use effect dependencies. I tried with the same solution in a video that is comparing deeply the previous reference of props with current props in most of my React app. The issue that I'm getting here is the effect setup logic doesn't run after the first render. It runs only when both the values are different after deep comparison. I used use deep compare effect, reusable library, to make the effect setup logic run after the first render and then change in dependencies after deep comparison. Okay, I think I'm following what you're talking about here, but it definitely would help to get like an actual what are you trying to do. I'm going to use this library in the future for sure, but I want to know if there's any way to run the effect setup logic after the first render, as well as using useRef when reactive values are compared deeply. Yeah, man. So yes, I do. I have a video about this, and I guess I need to sign in for that. But yeah, I'm kind of curious. Reproducible example. Okay, so let's look at the example. We've got an app, we've got Lodash, we've got a use effect. We're disabling next line here, presumably because it wants to see person in here. And interesting, okay. And then, I don't understand why we're doing that, but okay. And then you click on set person. Okay. So this isn't going to run when you change the person, because you are excluding the person from the dependency array. Yeah, this is an extremely contrived example, so I'm not sure I'm going to be able to provide you much use here, at least if this matters at all. So as far as the person is like, this is super duper not the way that you would do this. Whatever you're doing, you don't do it this way. I would need to see what you're actually trying to accomplish to give you an idea of what you should be doing. But yeah, this is not it, whatever it is. primarily because you are not including the person. And so whenever the person changes, this use effect won't be run. And so the state of the world will not be in sync with the state of your app, which is why we have a dependency array in the first place. So really, really difficult to talk about this in contrived examples. Got to have a real world example. But let's look at this. We have a use effect. There's no dependency array, so it runs on every re-render. We have this prev ref, which you define down here. So you keep this updated with the latest version of the person prop. And then you, in the use effect on every re-render, you're going to compare the previous person with the new person. And because this use effect appears before this one, this will in fact be the previous one. If we switch the versions, then it would be the same person every time. So it's important that those two have that order. This doesn't run at first render or other subsequent render. It only runs when props person and previous current is changed. Yeah, okay. Let's look at our console here. So render child, let's see. Yeah, interesting. So here, let's add what is this count thing about? Set count, render count. Oh, okay. So this is just to trigger a re-render of this component. Got it. Okay. So let's do console.log of props.person. Okay. So that person is undefined. Let's add a console.log use effect. Okay. So the use effect is running, but we're not getting this re-render running. And that actually is sensible because these are both undefined. And so that you would expect that to be the case. So I don't know, it sounds like based on what you're saying, the setup runs after first render and change dependency. So I think what your desire is for those to be different. So what you could do is initialize it kind of depends on what your goals are. I'm not going to take the time to look into this implementation because we got a lot of questions today, but I'm guessing that they accept a callback and they call your callback, and by default they will call it on the first render, and they just keep track of, is this the initial render? If it is, then call their callback. That's probably what they're doing. But yeah, use effect is going to run every time. And so if you want to say, like, what you could do is you could say, if the prev ref dot current is undefined and the props dot person is undefined, then you can do your logic there. You could, and in fact, you could say that, or, and now you're getting your re-render. You could do something like that. Here, we'll do, there we go. So you could say, if that basically, yeah, probably wouldn't do it that way. I might do something like symbol, maybe, I don't know. You just need to have some mechanism to say, this is the first render, also run our setup stuff. So I don't know, I can't really help too well without a more concrete example of what you're trying to accomplish. But yeah, this is really dangerous stuff. You're probably not doing things in the idiomatic React way. I never find myself needing to do something like this. So yeah, if you find yourself having to deal with this almost daily, then you're missing something pretty significant. So yeah, sorry. That's probably not the answer you were looking for. Okay. Let's see, here we go. Writing some tests and it's not working as I expect. I am here, let's say answering this now, Here we go. I'm not sure how to write the test. I would love to hear some ideas. So on a page component, I have a custom hook So I'm not sure what you mean by page component, but we'll continue. Have a custom hook that has been used like this. Use paginated endpoint generator. Okay. Sure. That get endpoint returns an endpoint as, what is get endpoint? Oh, okay. Okay, got it. I'm guessing those are like search params or something on that search URL, maybe. These state changes are passed into different components. The data is fetched using that endpoint. Okay, so you got a table with the search bar and table header. Okay. And yeah, the mechanism to update that. Okay. How do you think you could suggest to test these components? Okay. So we've got the table header. We're rendering the table header. We have the header keys. What are the header keys? Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. Sort criteria and set sort criteria. Okay. We get the ID button. I don't know what the ID button would be. Maybe that's for sorting the thing by the ID, I suppose. Then you click on that. I would recommend using user event for this instead of fire event as documented, but you can, this should probably work. Yeah, expect this to be called once. It could be that things aren't, I don't think that using fire event is going to be the problem here, but it's possible, depending on the implementation of your table header. It's possible that it's not listening for click events or something. If you use user event, you'll be more likely to not have this problem. So yeah, without seeing the implementation of the table header, I can't explain why this set search criteria or sort criteria would not be called. The to be called one. Oh, you know what? This is probably failing because you're saying it's called once. I'll bet it's called multiple times. That's probably a bug. But yeah, that's probably what's causing this to fail, especially if you're saying this passes. So it is called, it's just called more than once, which, yeah, like I said, that's probably a bug that you'll need to fix. And then this is, yeah, this is failing maybe because it's called twice. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't really explain this without seeing the actual code of how it's implemented. So sorry, but I would definitely look into this, like the fact that this is failing, saying to be called once, that's probably because it's called more than once, and that's probably a bug. Good luck. Okay, Logan, answering this now. Okay, and I remember seeing this and asking for a code example, and here it is. So we'll take a look at that. All right, find myself resorting to React hooks all the time instead of passing props down, like if a parent component has a use customer hook that gets used in use effect or something for loading, but it has a child component that also uses use customer. Okay, yep, that'll be two instances of this thing. So my guess is you're thinking, oh, these things should be shared because it's the same hook, but that's not the case. But we will see if that's the question here. Are there any downsides to developer experience or unit testing you can think of by using hooks basically everywhere versus passing props only one level? Yeah, I mean, for one, unless the hook is doing some sort of context thing, any state that is being managed by this hook will be unique to each instance of that hook call. And so if you want that state to be the same, then yeah, that's going to be a problem, which is typically like if you want to share the state from one parent component to the child, then you need to pass the props. If you are okay with those having completely different elements of state, then yeah, you'll use two instances of the hook. That's probably the disconnect right here. I don't find it cumbersome to mock a hook in a test, but others may, but I see it as you are either mocking the hook or mocking the prop in the test. Yeah, see, you're comparing like using hooks and using props as if they're the same thing. They're super duper not. And so it's not a matter of which is more testable or anything like that. It's a matter of like which accomplishes the task that you're trying to do. And you don't have to worry about typing your component props when using TS. Understand? Yep, that's all opinion. Okay, let's take a look at what this is doing. I'm not seeing any, we've got use query. Okay, so React query is using context to allow you to share these queries. So yeah, maybe use fetched users. If that's what you're doing, then yeah, like it will probably be fine in that case. I'm not sure about the implementation of use query, but it does have a shared cache, and so when you say use fetch users in two different components, then yeah, you're going to get the same user, so it will technically work. And React query will normalize all this stuff. So if you've got two components that are using the same query, it will only make one request. So yeah, that's fine. That works. The more generic question, I stand by my response to the more generic question, but yeah, if you're using use query under the hood and that's the thing that you're reusing, then yeah, sure, use the hook if you want to. I don't think that testing really comes into it necessarily, because I mock the fetch requests rather than mocking the hooks. Here, let me take a look at how they end up mocking things. That's interesting. Yeah, typically don't recommend doing this. It can be useful sometimes, but yeah, don't really recommend doing that very often. Just let it render the real thing. That's a good idea. I don't know if they yeah, I wouldn't do it that way. There's got to be like a real reason that you don't want to mock out the thing. Also, I'm not sure how dated this article is, but using the return value from render is typically not recommended. Instead, you'll want to use screen. Again, instead of fire event, you want to use user event. Fire event is a lower level tool that you typically don't want to use. Here they are, yeah, okay, just, oh, mocking out the base URL. Yeah, I don't see that as being useful at all, because you should be using MSW instead. Let's see. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, see, now we're mocking these hooks. Just so much mocking going on. It's all over the place. Don't do this much mocking. This mocking is not useful. Instead, you should use MSW. So I will add that here. And then you will thank me later. It's fabulous. Don't mock at the module level like this. I actually find myself very rarely using jest.mock, or if you're using vtest, v.mock. I just don't find it nearly as useful. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Good luck with what you're doing. Wenbo, quick question here. Let me say answering this now. Just to notify people that their question is finally being answered after almost a month. Suppose I have a drop-down list and there's a table whose data is based on the selected item on the drop-down. In a CSR client-side rendered page, I always fetch the different table data in use effects when selected item drop-down changes. How to use Remix to handle this? And then Jacob comes in and helps in a great way. Remix will automatically update it when the URL changes. So yes, that's exactly correct. This is what I would do. You can also use a form with meta get this filter. Yep. This is exactly how you do this in Remix. Drastically simplifies things. And even if you're just doing client-side rendered stuff, you can still do this with React Router. And so that's how I recommend doing it. Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, good job. Okay. Did you build those? Yep, Shatsian, it's awesome. Okay, Arpit, or Arpit. So answering this now. Okay, using SQLite in the Epic stack, how would you structure your database for an expense manager app? Here's what I'm asking. Let's say we have expense and income models, and each of them will have categories, but the categories will be different for income and expense, i.e. the expense will have categories like shopping, rent, etc., and income will have categories like salary, investment, etc. Would you create two models, expense category and income category? There would be default categories too, which aren't deletable by users. How would you manage that? Okay, so I think the core question is, if I'm understanding this correctly, yeah, so first of all, I'm going to say that a relational database like SQLite, in that environment, you absolutely do not want to try and implement some sort of polymorphic thing. You will just, that will not work out very well for you. And so you don't want to have like here's a category, and then we have, expense version and income version. So having two completely separate models, even if there's some duplication in those fields, as far as the schema is concerned, that's not a problem. You should be doing it that way, and it will be much better. So if that's the question, then yeah, expense category and income category make perfect sense. And then you can have different types. And in SQLite, you like the category name, I would presume you'd have a name called shopping, and or a name that could be shopping and rent, and a name that could be salary and investment. And so those would, like, that name column would just be a string. Like that's as good as you can get it to be. But if you want it to, the problem with that is you can't really enforce the name value at the database level. And so another alternative you could do is just have a database table for every single possible category, which may or may not be a desired thing for you. Probably not desired in your case for this. I'm guessing that you want an expense manager app to be like to let the users make their own categories. And in that case, yeah, you definitely will just say it can be a string and it can be whatever they call it. So that's probably what you're going to want to do. But yeah, I would definitely have two different tables for expense category and income category. I think that would make sense. There would be default category too, which aren't managed by the user. So yeah, for that, that would just be like your okay, yeah, let's think about that. So you probably have some like these categories, I guess they belong to users because they're set up by the user. But it potentially you could have like an add, let's see, you may just have a separate table for those default categories. So like, so you'd have the concept of categories that belong to users, but then you'd also have the concept of categories that belong to nobody and are accessible by all users, right? Because if I'm a user and I create a category, then I'm going to want to make sure that other users of the app are not able to access my categories. Like maybe I make a category for Fluffy, my cat. I don't want other users to see Fluffy the cat, right? But yeah, if you have some default categories that are not controllable by users, then that's like a separate thing. You've got user categories, and then you've got default or app-wide categories. So in that scenario, there are a couple ways you could do that, but I think the simplest would, well, okay, I'll tell you both, and then you can decide. You could have the expense and income category. I think that having those two tables is a good idea. And then you could have a property on it that says whether or not it's shared. Or like accessible public. Yeah, maybe public would be a good one. And then you can just have, and then those will be associated to a user. And what you could do is just have a user in the database that's part of the seed script that generates the default categories. That's just like a fake user, or like the admin user or something like that. And they have categories associated to them that are public. And then Yeah, the more I say this, the more I hate this idea. But what you could do is allow users to make their own categories public. But then you'd have to have some mechanism to say users like subscribe to those categories. That's all stupid. Okay, so back it up. We're not going to do that way. Instead, I think it is a better idea to have expense category, income category, and then shared expense category and shared income category, or like default or something. And then that way all users get those default categories in addition to their own. That's what I would do. That's how I would do that. At least that's how I'd start doing it. Good luck on that data modeling problem. Okay, Pete okay, silly question. Answering this now. Okay. And it looks like Jacob jumped into here, so I probably won't have much to add. I'll probably just say whatever Jacob says, because he really understands this stuff. But I'm trying just getting started with Remix, and noticed in all the loader examples, the return value response objects created with a JSON or redirect utility functions. Redirect is pretty straightforward, but are there actual benefits using JSON? I mean, at first glance, just returning non-serialized objects seems to produce the same result. And the docs just say to do that without explaining a reason. Thanks. So the originally when Remix showed up, yeah, you could just return objects, and for backward compatibility reasons, that's still possible. But doing the problem with that is if you ever wanted to set headers, then now you have to turn it into a response. And so then the JSON utility was made to make that easier. Well, then this became a challenge with type inference. And so you had to do like this loader data type thing that was really annoying. And so eventually Colin Hacks on Twitter, the creator of Zod, came in and was like, hey, we can do better and we can infer these types better. And so implemented some really awesome type inference stuff for the JSON helper. And so if you use the JSON helper and you don't specify a return type of your loader, then you can do exactly what Jacob is saying by passing type of loader. And we can't really do that with objects because, well, yeah, we might be able to make that work with objects, but I'm trying to think. Yeah, we probably could make that work with objects, but I just don't think that's a good idea because it limits you on your ability to handle the headers properly. So yeah, don't use objects, just use the helper. It's primarily useful for that inference stuff. So yeah, there you go. Jacob was right. Answering this now. And looks like somebody else actually answered this question also, so thank you. We'll take a look at this. Hi all, I'm just started here, welcome. And I have an issue with having two API calls when used inside a use effect. Here we have this one is an async function, and I'm storing the result in state. So it re-renders and calls the API the second time. For every API calls, initiate a transaction from the API to a SQL. So don't want twice the transactions every time I access this component. Any way of doing it otherwise should be very helpful. Well, I will just tell you right up front, you should be using React Query for this, either React Query or React Router or both, because yeah, doing fetch calls in useEffect is not the way we do things anymore. It's definitely the way that our tools do it under the hood, or often is the way that happens. Sometimes it's the way that happens, but yeah, we do not do this ourselves anymore. Yeah, problem is with the use effect. Use effect is called one time at first when you don't have any dependencies. Yep, that's exactly correct. Well, that is the case. In this case, we don't have any dependencies. Let's see, it's getting called. Yeah, I'm kind of confused why it would be getting called twice. You're probably running in strict mode with whatever tool you used to bootstrap your app. You probably have the strict mode component that is wrapping your entire app, and that will call useEffects twice, which is going to be the problem. So that's what's causing the issue. This is one of the reasons why I really don't like strict mode at all, and I don't use it anymore myself. Because they made that change where it calls the useEffects twice. I hate that. But yeah, that's probably what's going on in your case. and I would suggest using React Router and or React Query. So good luck. All right, Benjamin, this is a question that was asked today. All right, answering this now. And there's nobody in the Zoom call right now. So when I'm done with this, unless any other questions show up, looks like there's one, then we're almost done. I am bald, and yet I'm losing hairs with date again. I'm so sorry, Benjamin. Can you explain how I should manage the following? I format, yeah, so you get this format from a third party, you parse it, and then you get this value. And then if using parsed variable in a SQL query to filter on the date column, I will not get the right results because the date in part will be 2023-08-19 instead of 20, and I'll miss some rows. So that is, I have definitely run into this annoyance before, and it is going to have to do with your clock, which I think is what you're suggesting here. You're running in France. That actually is like, yeah, it's only 2 hours off. That's interesting that it would parse that way. But yeah, dates are going to be problematic. If I go to, oh man, I'm so glad that my cookies weren't up. Goodness gracious, had to go in and validate that session. Okay, so if we go new date right here, and actually let's do new date 2020. Here, let's do the exact same date. This, no, this one. So this is what you're getting from the API. And for me, that ends up being August 19th because just the way that time zones work and everything, you're experiencing the same problem, except your time zone offset is going to be 2, I guess, instead of 8, I suppose. So what you normally need to do for this is handle the time zone offset of your system wherever you're at. You're saying, hey, I could just prefix it by 2 hours, but it feels super wrong, especially if I want to start deploying around the world. So I'm trying to think of where I've done this. I think I did this in Rocket Rental. It might even be in the Epic stack as well. So let's see if we can find that in our utils. I think it's probably in miscellaneous utils. Offset, no. Yeah, offset. Nope, not in here. Let's look in Rocket Rental, and actually maybe my own website. Here, actually, whoops. Offset. Yeah, here we go. So here's what I do. You take the date string, and then you do the parse ISO stuff, and then you add the number of minutes with new date get time zone offset, and that will give you what you're looking for. So give that a whirl. I hope that is helpful. I'm sorry that you are losing hair. All right. Great. Well, let's answer this next one. Siblis, is DSA is important for full stack roles front end? I know what DSA is. I just forgot for a second. Let me go look that up. Nope, that's probably not what they're talking about. Data structures. Oh yeah, clearly not something that that I think about too often. Answering this now, even though you probably are watching because you asked when I since I started. So data structures and algorithms, sure, yeah. I think it like the more knowledge that you have generally about software and stuff, the deeper your well of knowledge goes, the more access or the more you can use those things for solving your problem. So like, for example, this parse date thing we just talked about with Benjamin, without having that knowledge in my backlog of experience, I might have just said, yeah, sure, just add 2 hours to that, and then you can, you know, whatever. So like the more knowledge that you have and experience, whoa, what is this? 55% faster with GitHub Copilot? This is an ad. What? All right, that's interesting. Wow, that was the craziest thing. Okay, weird. Huh. Uh, why would you put an ad right there? An ad for Copilot? Like, okay, that's just the weirdest place to put an ad. That is so interesting. Okay. Anyway, getting back to your question. So the more experience you have with data structures and algorithms, the more that you can use that knowledge in your day-to-day work. So I can say that my level of experience with those things has been helpful to my work, and I can't say whether adding more knowledge in that realm would help me further, or how much it would help me, because I don't have that knowledge. I don't have the knowledge I don't have, right? So is it important? Uh, I don't know. I feel like I'm hacking away pretty well without even knowing what DSA meant when you asked. I like, yeah, it's probably helpful. Would I spend any time studying data structures and algorithms? Probably not. Not myself anyway. But I have had some experience with data structures and stuff. So having a little bit of experience with like different data structures is probably helpful and worth a couple hours of exposure at least. So there you go. That's my take on that. Okay, glad to help, Ben. Benjamin, sorry, I don't know if you go by Ben. Hey, sorry to post this in the middle of office hours. No, you're totally welcome to post in the middle of office hours. I still have 20 minutes on office hours. If I answer this and no other questions show up, then I'm ending early. So React 18 introduced server components and client components. So using server components in our code will lead to more static web hosting. I don't agree with that statement, but okay. As we need to perform some computation or interact with some other things, we need computation power and we'll not be able to host it on S3. Oh, I see. Oh, no more static web hosting. Yeah, well, I can talk about that too. Is my understanding correct? Yeah, okay. So you can absolutely statically generate a website that uses server components. So all the server components will run at build time, like that's running on a server, and then the generated index HTML files, the output there will be usable by a statically hosted site. So like you can generate your client build, that's your hydrated stuff, and then you'd have your server components that are just generated at build time. I'm not sure exactly how all that works and all that, but I also am not super concerned about that because I run servers now for the last several years, just been doing actual servers. I'm not super interested in static websites anymore, but I can tell you that server components with static sites is possible. But I'm not going to dive any deeper than that because I do not care about static sites. So I want a server for my stuff. So yeah, hope that helps answer that question. So Siblis is asking a follow-up. So I'm going to wait just a moment, or maybe not asking, maybe just saying something. So I'm just going to wait a moment for that, and then we can, yeah, and we can wrap this up. And while we're waiting, one of these is the first event, and I cannot tell which. So let's go to this one. Yeah, that one got removed. So we'll delete this one. Delete, edit event. No, cancel. How do I end this event? Weird. End event, there it is. There it is. Okay, good. Okay, what PayPal ask for interview? So my PayPal interview experience, this has been a long time since that happened. Let's see, that was 2015. Whoa, that was 8 years ago. How did that happen? All that time. That's crazy. Yeah, that is wild. End of 2015 is when I interviewed at PayPal. The experience, I feel like I have talked about this elsewhere somewhere, but yeah, the experience was actually very similar to my experience interviewing at Facebook as well, which was around the same time. And that is that they fly you in for a on-site interview, or at least this, this is pre-COVID, so I don't know what they do now, but they flew me in. And then I went into a 1-hour interview that was kind of technical in nature. They, asked me, write some functions or think about this architecture or stuff like that. And then I had another person come in, and we talked about and this is very similar to what Facebook said. So we'll just answer both questions at the same time. But yeah, with the second interview, it was more design related. So like, here's this design. How would you implement this in HTML and CSS? And then I had a lunch. So at Facebook, it was with Christopher Shadow, and what a lovely person. He is great. And then with at PayPal, it was the director of the area that I was interviewing for, and he was also very nice. He was asked me questions about my open source contributions and just what my goals are, that sort of thing. And then I went back to another interview. This one at PayPal, it was with a manager. I think I did a manager interview at Facebook as well. And that was more like cultural type things, like how do you deal with what's the word, conflict and stuff like that. And then I did one final hour. So like this was 5 hours altogether, with like little breaks between, including lunch. But yeah, so the last hour was more JavaScript specific stuff, like implement this function, and it was all very practical. I also had other interviews at other companies that were a lot more data structure and algorithm type focused things that do this thing that you will never do on the job, and I hate those so much. So yeah, very practical skills asked at both PayPal and Facebook. I actually really, as far as interviewing goes, I actually enjoyed those pretty well. So definitely a stressful thing. And in fact, there was one person at PayPal asked me to implement something. This was before classes were really fleshed out in JavaScript, and they asked me to implement a class with prototypes, or they wanted me to solve a problem, and they said like, you can do things with prototypes, and then I didn't. I just used regular functions, and they said, why don't you do it this way? And I said, because we don't do that in JavaScript. And it was very clear that this particular person was a Java developer, and so I basically taught them stuff in that interview, which was kind of interesting. But I got hired, so there's that. What should I focus on to get a job out of college, DSA or vanilla JS, HTML? It really kind of depends. What I would suggest, I wish that I could give you a better answer to this question, but I can't. So I'll do the best that I can. And that is to say, look at the companies that you're interested in interviewing at, and reach out to their recruiters and say, hey, I am in college, I'm coming out of college, and I want to get a job at your company. Can you give me some tips and advice on how I can perform the best at your interviews? Some companies will be like, no, we're going to hide that from you, and we're going to be jerks about it. You probably don't want to work at companies like that. Other companies are like, yeah, we want you to perform your best, and we want to see the best that you can do. So here at this company, we interview like this. And like, there are a lot of companies that are very open about their interview process. Like, we ask you data structure and algorithms questions, and now you're like, oh, okay, so I should focus on data structure algorithms. And others will say, we're very practical in our interviews, and we're going to ask you, like, what have you built, and show us the stuff that you're working on, and tell us about the conflict resolution stuff that you've done. And so in those, you're like, oh, okay, well, I got to go build stuff so I can show that off. So yeah, it's going to be different for every company because we're really bad at tech interviews. So sorry. All right, Nitro, what you got for me? And actually, while Nitro is finishing that up, I will just mention, if you are watching this later and you were like, oh, I had a question, you can always throw a question in the Discord. Let me just double check, but I believe I should have office hours next week. Yes, I will be able to have office hours next week. So feel free to come next week. But if you want to get your question answered sooner, you can give me a call on the Call Can podcast. You can record right in the browser and ask a question, and then I will reply with my recording. And then our question answer session will be published on the podcast, and you'll get an email with my response and all that. All right. Hey, I went through your article on testing React application. In one of our project, we followed the container and component architecture. Container contains all the state. Components are stateless, pure UI stuff. How do we test these? Testing the container is enough by mocking components, or do we test both container and the component? I would recommend just test the container and don't mock the component, and then you get both. That's what I would do. Okay, what do you do at PayPal in day-to-day life? I mean, I haven't worked at PayPal for a long time, just to be clear. I joined up with PayPal in 2015, and I left at the beginning of 2019. So it's been quite a few years that I haven't been at PayPal. But what I did at PayPal, I worked on I started on the cross-border transaction team. So if you want to send money to a friend in another country, that was the app that I worked on. Then I kind of expanded to just general peer-to-peer transactions. So send money to a friend or a family member or even a business anywhere in the world, whether domestic or international. I worked on that a little bit. And then I started getting into more architectural level things. So I worked on a tool that they're still using called PayPal Scripts. That it was is a tool that all new PayPal apps start with, that kind of encapsulates all of the configuration for all the other tools. So I'm not sure what they're using now, but at the time it was Webpack and TypeScript and Prettier and ESLint and all of the things that we wanted to be the same across all these different apps. Then I wrapped up my time there working on what I called PP React, which is the React component library for consistent UI for our buttons and our accordions and date pickers and all that stuff. I was starting that project and got it off the ground, and they are still using that as well, which is actually very cool because 2019 was 4 years ago now. Over 4 years ago I left, and they are still using both PayPal Scripts and PP React. So sick. What do people mean when they say cool things like, what problems did you solve? Can you give me a complex app idea that I can build? Like you can you can build anything. And if you are, and like in the process of building, you will come up with cool thing or responses to the question, what problems have you solved? So if you're not sure what to build, what I actually recommend is to build a clone of something else. The benefit of building a clone of something like, let's make your own X, or build your own Discord. That would be pretty wild. Or even what I recommend actually is starting simpler with like a to-do app. But the benefit of cloning something that already exists is that you don't have to get stuck with product decisions. You can say, this is how they did it. I will do it the exact same way, and I will implement it in some way, and you will learn a lot doing that. So Hacker News clone or something like that, also very good. Good idea. Okay, waiting for another question. We've still got 8 minutes, so I'm just chilling. There we go. What would be your best tip to get into flow state while coding? Oh man, have I got a tip for you. This is an app formerly known as Centered, now known as Suka. And Suka is just phenomenal. Really, really great way to get into flow and stay in flow. And we've got an Epic Web Dev group there. So if you want to get in and stay in flow with other people, then I would recommend downloading Suka. Let me grab that. Or actually Centered. app, that will redirect me, thesuka.co. That's what it is. So let me link you to that. This is the answer. It's fabulous. Have you ever used FFmpeg? Yes, I definitely have. In fact, the Call Kent podcast, this uses FFmpeg. When I record my response to your question and everything, FFmpeg mashes those together and turns it into a podcast episode. So if we go to, let's see, create, what is it called? Recorder, submit recording form. Okay, let's find where we end up from here. No, recorder. No. This is going to be in calls, admin. Yeah, I can't remember where this where I put this call admin. Here we go. So once I finish, it ends up in my action data and create episode audio. There it is. Yeah, here we go. FFmpeg server. Duh. Okay, so I take the call base 64 string. Yeah, I legitimately take the MP3 and it's a base 64. That's how it's stored. I tested out using binary instead, and base 64 was smaller somehow. I don't know how. But yeah, so I do the base 64 of your call and my response, and then I create buffers out of that, and then I write those to disk, to files, and then I pass these arguments to FFmpeg. So yeah, we have the intro, that's a file. We have the interstitial, that's like the stuff that happens between our call and response, and our response, and then we have the outro, and then I do this really complex filter thing that I wrote without ChatGPT. Oh man, I don't even know how I did that. Honestly, that blows my mind, but it totally works. It like removes silence for if somebody pauses speaking for more than a second, then I chop that out. Yeah, which is pretty cool. Yeah, this is nuts. This is so crazy that I managed to do this, and the fact that FFmpeg does. But like, I've got hundreds of episodes now that have all run through this code. So yes, to answer your question, yes, I have used FFmpeg. Oh, and I have tried FFmpeg WASM. Because I wanted to experiment with deploying my website on Cloudflare Workers, and that requires FFmpeg WASM, you can only run it with WASM. I didn't end up doing that. I will not be able to answer this question, certainly not in the 4 minutes that I've got left. Sorry. Yeah, Node WASM stuff is going to be pretty tough. So I'm sorry, I won't be able to answer this question. Out of curiosity, how's your desk setup look like? Yeah, take a look at this. Okay. And with that, I think we're about done. So thanks everybody for joining. That was a good time. And yeah, I'm going to get back to working on Epic Web Dev. If you haven't seen it already, this is Epic Web Dev, and it's fabulous. It's awesome. You should take a look. So much cool stuff that is coming very soon. Here, we're going to have another thing here for all of the workshops. You're going to love it. It's going to be sick. So look forward to that. Thanks, everybody.